Hi.
Hi, good evening.
Hiya.
Hi.
Richard, hello.
Hi, Vishwani.
Well, you made it back, Jill. That's great.
Yeah.
Welcome to everyone. Really pleased you could join us today, and we'll just take some time for people to arrive and one by one.
This weather system as it comes in will bring some rain, perhaps not as plentiful as today. And then the same weather front becomes rather sunny.
Someone's got the radio on in the background, television. Maybe what we should do is mute everyone. Yeah, I'm going to mute everyone. You can always unmute yourself, but that's the unwanted noise.
Hello.
Hello. Julie. Hello, Julie. Are you doing the admitting thing, Heather?
No, I thought I wouldn't bother.
No.
No, I couldn't. Yeah, I'm on it, Vishwani.
Okay.
Don't worry. Great.
Melissa, is that my old friend Melissa? Can't see you. Welcome to everyone who's just arrived. We're just taking a moment to let everyone join. Start in a minute or two. Okay, well, should we get started then? So first off, really warm welcome to everyone who's joining us tonight, to everyone who's here right now, and to everyone who's watching the recording subsequently. It's good to see some old friends and good to see some new faces. We have these sessions fairly regularly, about once a month or maybe slightly less. And they are one of the ways that we at Mindfulness Wales are wanting to engage with everyone who's interested in our work, who's interested in mindfulness, and who's interested in Wales. Really pleased to be that our speaker tonight is Michael Chaskalson, who happens to be an old friend of mine, very old friend. And Michael, over the last 2 decades, really, well, maybe I'll just say, as a very old friend, I know that Michael's been practicing mindfulness, practicing meditation for well over 4 decades. And the last 2 of those has really focused on mindfulness, being a mindfulness teacher, an MBSR teacher, MBCT, and particularly focusing on mindfulness in the workplace, mindfulness for leaders, and he himself is a leader in that field. He teaches quite widely at business schools around the world, and he's a coach, and his last book was Mindful Coaching. Have I got that right? The Mindful Coach? You can tell us. You're muted at the moment, Michael. You can tell us. You can correct anything else I get wrong right now. And he's going to introduce himself, so I won't say any more, but except that he is a well-respected figure in this field and well-respected for good reason. So welcome to Michael, welcome to everyone. And we'll have some announcements now from Liz Williams, who's the chair of Mindfulness Wales.
Thank you, Vishwapani, and thank you, everyone. Just to remind you, you will have been asked as you entered whether you're okay with this being recorded. Just to remind you, you can rename yourself anonymous if you aren't happy with that. But we will be putting the recording of this event on our website as usual for people to So just a little bit about what we are up to. And my first request is to keep in touch. Can you make sure you're on our mailing list? I've got some things to talk about. There are lots of things that are still in the planning stage. And so if you want to know what we're up to, we'll put the website address in the chat. And if you sign up to our mailing list, you can make sure that you find out. And my next request is follow us on social media. Again, we'll put the links up. We're on Facebook and on Twitter. And that's important because we're trying to widen out how we get our information out. And we will carry on with these events because they're really important in terms of our communication and our networking. But one of the things we're doing at the moment is mindfulness and education stories, where we're collecting stories from practitioners who are talking to other practitioners, to teachers, about what they're doing in schools. And that's particularly important in Wales at the moment because we've got a new curriculum with such open options to include mindfulness. And of course, that is our future there. This is schools talking to schools and education settings talking to other education settings. But my request to you then, if you're following us on social media and you get any of our mindful education stories, will you forward them, like, retweet, share, forward, whatever works there, so that we can get all of this around as widely as possible. So I'd be really grateful if you could do that. Then our next event actually is for the Welsh medium education sector on the 29th of March, and it will be, much of it will be in Welsh. But one of the important things for Sporting Wales is that we do need to recognise that in all of our services, we need to make sure we've got bilingual services available. And in education, of course, nearly a quarter of our children are in Welsh medium education. So the 29th of March is about showing off, announcing, introducing some of the Welsh media materials, the high quality materials we've got to support a mindfulness curriculum in schools. And they're available in English, they're now available in Welsh, and this will be talking about that. And I will just say the high quality bit is important. We know lots of people say they do mindfulness, and they might mean, you know, playing an app or doing some mindful colouring. And I think we would all say that it's fine. It might actually give you a quiet few moments, it'll give you a quiet hour. But we're using the analogy that if you give someone a fish, you feed them for a day. If you teach them to fish, you feed them for life, and where we're going is the high quality curriculum to feed them for life. And I think that I'm saying that for education, but it applies across the board to what we do, doesn't it? So the next thing that might be coming up that we're working on is to follow up the energy and the interest that there was in our last event in Frazzle Cafe, and what potential there might be for Wales. And there was a real energy about that in the chat, and from the Ruby Wax. This is from the Ruby Wax event on 16th of December. And so what we are hoping that we will be able to arrange is for someone from Frazzle Cafe, the organisation, to talk to us about how it works, so that we can see whether it, as it is what we want for Wales, or whether there is some room for something different that we may actually be able to provide for in Wales. And you know, this actual support for, I'm going to say the general public, but I mean everybody, has become even more important, hasn't it, over the last couple of weeks there. And, you know, we need to think about what services we offer. And it could be that Frazzle Cafe as it is enough, or it could be that there are some things that we might want to adapt for Wales. So if we can get that off the ground, you'll get that if you're on our mailing list, to find out a little bit more and discuss what we might be able to do. So what we're trying to do is a bit of a mix and match between the sort of high profile events like tonight, which is about raising our game. This is about really inspiring us from the much wider world, about how we actually improve ourselves and raise our game there. But the other things that we will weave into our program is sharing our own good practice, that we've already got a lot going on. So we'll be looking at more discussive, more workshop type based things, more panels where we get to ask questions. So we'll do a mix and match on that one. Give you more chances to join in discussions in some of our events there, and develop the ideas, because you all have a lot to offer as well. So we're looking to do a bit of a mix and match there. And we won't please all the people all the time, but we'll have a good go. And just to finish off by saying, the Mindfulness Wales is not just the board. We do what we can within our capacity and sometimes our capability, but we always try to do what we can and stretch where we can there. But what will make the difference is all of us working together. This is about critical mass, that our aims of helping Wales to become a more compassionate, kinder and fairer society need all of us on board. So welcome to all of you, and say let's do this together. Mindfulness Wales is about all of us. We just organise things behind the scenes there. So watch the space and join our mailing list, share and retweet and like and anything else on social media, and please join us on the journey. So we get to be more compassionate, fairer and kinder. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So I'm going to hand over now to to Michael to lead a meditation, and start with, I'm going to spotlight Michael, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vishwapani. It's great to be here with you and with everyone else. I'm so pleased that you invited me. I'm just going to stick a link in the chat for my website. I think I've got that link right. But it's got resources and stuff if you want to go there, and if the link doesn't work, give me a shout. Okay. Very good. So let's begin. Let's begin with the meditation, and we'll take it from there. And I thought, you know, today there's been so much on the news recently, and there's so much probably in our own minds around events happening in Ukraine that are, you know, deeply, deeply troubling. Thank you. Deeply, thanks, Tommy. Deeply, deeply troubling for all of us. It's an absolutely awful time, and you know, with modern media, it's an awful time that comes right into our own homes, and yet there's a limit to what we can do about all of this. It can bring us up against our own feelings of impotence, and it can cause us to feel quite anxious and quite disturbed. So something that's very important at times like this is that we kind of manage our own responses differently. There's something very interesting in the capacity we can get through mindfulness practice to feel something, feel with something, and yet also not be thrown by something. And I think that that's something that we all need to be paying attention to right now. We need to be watching where our attention goes and to give due attention to what is troubling in the circumstances around us, but not remain there, not get hooked by it, not get drawn into it and caught up in the vortex of trouble that's going on all around us, because that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't do us any good, doesn't do anyone else any good. So being able to feel for, feel with, and somehow also manage and stay apart from trouble like this is really, really crucial. It's only by doing that that we're going to be able to retain our own creativity, our own initiative, our ability to help and to be with these circumstances resourcefully. So from that perspective, I wondered if we might do a meditation which is based on kind of breathing with what is here. We call whatever's here to mind, whatever's on our minds right now, we allow it to be here and breathe with it. We're not trying to get rid of what's here, we're acknowledging what's here. If there's troubling thoughts here, we breathe with them. If there are good thoughts here, we breathe with them. And we allow what is the case to be the case, breathing with it, holding it, as it were, encircling it in our own attitude of kindness and well-wishing. So let's do that for a short while. And if you care to join in here, you might want to get a bit upright. If it's right for you, you could allow your eyes to close. It might be a good idea to come away from the screen. There's nothing to see here, folks, just another middle-aged white guy talking on the screen. We've seen plenty of those. And just allowing yourself to be where you are right now, feeling feet in contact with floor, feeling body in contact with chair, feeling the sensations in your hands and fingers, so really coming to your body. And noticing too what might be here right now in thinking and feeling. And whatever is here, simply allowing it to be what it is. And if there's not much going on, then that's fine, just being with that. And breathing with it. So what we're doing here is paying attention to our breath and bringing a kind of allowing attitude to whatever may be here in our minds. Simply letting what's here be what's here. And holding it as best you can with an attitude of gentleness, kindness, curiosity, allowing. Letting it be. Opening, allowing, breathing with. So whatever comes into the mind here comes into the mind. Whatever feelings emerge are simply the feelings that emerge, and we breathe with this. Breathing with what's here. Letting it be. Holding, allowing, breathing with. Kindly open attention. if at any time you find yourself being sucked away into patterns of thinking that don't feel helpful, you can always just accentuate the breath and come just a little bit back. Refocusing, coming back to the breath, and once more opening to what's here. Allowing. Letting things be. And breathing. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. We can begin very slowly to bring the practice to a close. So breathing with and letting it be, not getting spun off into places we'd rather not go. Keeping something of our own intention and something of our own initiative in all of this. I don't know if people remember, but after the Bataclan bombing in Paris, there was this extraordinary thing written by Antoine Léris on Facebook, where he talked a bit about his experiences after his wife was killed there. And he wrote this: on Friday night, you stole the life of an exceptional being, the love of my life, the mother of my son. But you won't have my hatred. I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know. You're a dead soul. If this God for which you kill indiscriminately made us in his own image, every bullet in the body of my wife will have been a wound in his heart. So no, I don't give you the gift of hating you. You are asking for it, but responding to hatred with anger would be giving in to the same ignorance that made you what you are. You want me to be afraid, to view my fellow countrymen with mistrust, to sacrifice my freedom for security. You have lost. I saw her this morning, finally, after many nights and days of waiting. She was just as beautiful as when she left on Friday night, and just as beautiful as when I fell hopelessly in love with her over 12 years ago. Of course, I'm devastated with grief. I admit this small victory, but it will be short-lived. I know she will accompany us every day, and that we will find ourselves in this paradise of free souls to which you'll have no access. We are too, my son and I, but we are stronger than all the armies of the world. I don't have any more time to devote to you. I have to join Melville, who is waking up from his nap. He is barely 17 months old. He will eat his meals as usual, and then we are going to play as usual. And for the whole of his life, this little boy will threaten you by being happy and free, because you will not have his hatred either. And I think the overall sentiment that underlies that is something that we all really need to be bearing in mind at times like this, times of trouble like this, that we don't give the gift of our anger and our hatred to oppressors. We retain a kind of emotional initiative. We, as it were, reserve to ourselves the right to stay positive, to stay kind, to stay loving, compassionate, empathic in the face of what is going down all around us. So something to bear in mind. I'm going to be speaking about mindful leadership. I've been asked to speak about mindful leadership, and I'm very happy to do that. I'd like to ground it, if at all possible, in people's lived concerns. What's on your minds? What brings you here? So a couple of things. One is, I'd be really good if people could just begin to put into the chat, what's on your mind? What brings you here? What are you looking for from this session? It'd be great to hear some of that. And, everyone, feel free to just stick it in the chat. Tommy, who is looking after the session support, will help to bring those things to my attention via Vishwapani. But also, if at any time you have specific questions or points you'd like to make, do please use the chat. It's a really, really valuable resource. So let's make maximum use of it, and we'll try and keep this as interactive as we can. We may find as we're going that it seems appropriate at some point to break into small breakout groups, but we'll just see how the session's unfolding and what's useful or not useful for people. So perhaps in fact we could begin by just each of us taking a few moments now to put down, your own thoughts about, what is it that you'd like to get from the session, what brings you here, and if you have any specific questions, do put them down as well. So while all that's going on, I'll just say a little bit about myself. I'm Michael Chaskalson. I'm speaking to you from my garden office in Cambridge in the UK, where I've been running mindfulness sessions for people around the world during the current pandemic. It's a strange and wonderful world we're in, isn't it? Strangely more widely connected and less connected than perhaps we've ever been. Right now I'm engaged in writing a new book, trying to go into the psychology of awakening, whatever that may be, which I'm finding fascinating. But ordinarily my work is in teaching mindfulness in leadership contexts. So I'm often doing that in business schools at Ashridge Executive Education in Hertfordshire here at London Business School. And I've been an adjunct professor at IE Business School in Madrid as well. And I teach very occasionally here at Churchill College in the University of Cambridge at the Muller Institute for Leadership there. So I'm beginning to notice things coming up in the chat. Maggie's saying how mindful leadership can help change organizational school culture to one that is more compassionate and kind indeed. Yes, an interesting point, Maggie. And is it Kerry Jones or Sari? I'm not sure how the pronunciation works.
Carrie Jones.
Kerry. So hiya, and you've been doing Transcendental Meditation for over 10 years, and it's revelatory and it's changed your attitudes radically. How do you promote this to other people? People in the office are cynical, and you think the general public are too. Okay. And Julie is looking for ways to support people in the organization to make the transition back into the workplace. We're dealing with a lot of anxiety and fear. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Big questions.
So if you like, what we can do is, rather than you having to look at the chat, you just talk about what you want to talk about, and we could probably quite a lot of points will be coming into the chat, and then we'll sift them and I can put them to you.
Yeah. Good. I'm finding the chat quite distracting. I think I'm going to close it down.
That's the problem with chat, isn't it?
Yeah. Lovely. So I'll start. Oh no! It starts to come as a pop-up. No. So I've closed the chat pane and I'm starting to get them as pop-ups. Never mind. I'll say a little bit about. Look, there's many different approaches to mindful leadership, and there's many different ways in which it's a compendious term. It's a very compendious term. And one of the ways we speak about it is in terms of mindful leadership training courses, which are sort of variants on the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy courses that many of you will be familiar with. Not everybody, but I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the structured 8-week course. So for example, with colleagues, I've created a mindful leadership course, which we delivered in a waitlist control trial in a business school and measured pre-post outcomes to see what changed for people, what happened when people who regard themselves as senior organizational leaders learn mindfulness. And what we discovered in that context was that when people in those positions learn mindfulness, they develop 3 meta capacities. So what we describe as meta capacities, abilities which cover a wider range of inner abilities, you might say. And we call these allowing, inquiry, and meta awareness. For us, the shorthand is AIM, allowing, inquiry, and meta awareness. Allowing, the capacity to allow what is the case to be the case, to let what's here be what's here, to be reality focused, to pay attention to what's going on right now with an attitude of kindness. A bit like that, meditation we began with, allowing, letting what's here be what's here. It's really radically reality focused. It's saying this is what it's like right now. This is what is here, and it's allowed to be here because it's here. It is what is going on. It is like this. Here it is. It's like this. It's like this. So that's allowing, holding what's here with an attitude of kindness, but also with an attitude of curiosity, which brings us to the inquiry piece. What's this like? How am I feeling this? Where am I feeling this? What's going on here? What's up? A really close engagement with the present moment, an inner inquiry and an outer inquiry, noticing what's here for me, noticing what's here in the system I'm working in. And then meta-awareness, and that's the ability to step ever so slightly apart from your thinking, from your feeling, from your sensing, from your impulses, and to see them as just that, as a flow of thinking, feeling, sensing, and impulses. Meta-awareness. Sometimes this is spoken of in psychological circles as metacognition, but we want to hold a broader idea for it. It's more than just a cognitive process. It's also a feelingful process, a sensing process. It's just this ability to step ever so slightly back. Now, people who practice mindfulness will be very familiar with the processes that are involved here. You set out to meditate. That's one of the key things that we do. We teach people to meditate. You're sitting meditating and you're meditating, and then you notice that you're not meditating, that you're actually thinking. You just find that you're thinking. You see that you're thinking, and you go, hang on, I'm thinking. I didn't mean to be thinking. I meant to be meditating. And you let go of the thoughts and move your attention back to, say, your breath, whatever it is that you're trying to do. And that happens over and over. So notice what's going on here, folks. You're seeing what's happening. You're seeing what you're up to. You're letting go of what you're up to, and you're moving your attention somewhere else. You see what you're up to. You let go of what you're up to. You move your attention somewhere else. You see what you're doing. You let go of it. You move your attention somewhere else. That's meta-awareness at work. We see what we're doing. We notice what we're up to. We let go of it. Move our attention somewhere else. And for leaders, this is really powerful. You see that you're about to react and say something unhelpful to a subordinate. You notice what you're up to, and you make a different choice. You see that you're getting preoccupied by a certain issue in your organization, and your attention's going there over and over and over in unhelpful ways. You notice what you're up to, and you make a different choice. So it's this capacity to see what you're up to and to make a different choice that's really crucial here. So these 3 things, aim, allowing, inquiry, and meta-awareness, open up a space where people can respond rather than react. They can make wiser choices about what comes next. And that, we discovered, increases people's empathy, their capacity to focus, increases their adaptability, their capacity for perspective taking, to see that, try out different perspectives, and to see that this perspective from which I'm looking at things is just that, it's only a perspective, and I could see things differently, and that other people see things differently to me, the ability to negotiate between perspectives. I see it like this, you see it like that. Let's see if we can find a common perspective. That all increases. And overall, that increases people's capacity to collaborate, to be resilient, and to make smarter decisions in conditions of complexity. So those are the outcomes of our research. And that's one way of framing, what we mean by mindful leadership. It's the ability to aim, the ability to allow, to inquire, to have meta-awareness, and to approach things from that basis. So that's leaders who are mindful. That's one way of putting it. Another aspect of it, though, is more organizational. It's more about how can we as an organization become more self-aware? How can we as an organization reflect more readily on what we're up to? And for us, the real key there is team mindfulness, what we speak of as team mindfulness. And in terms of team mindfulness, we're not talking about a team that is mindful, a team that does mindfulness practice together, a team that sit together meditating. We're not talking about that. Really, we're rather talking about a team that is encouraged to become aware of its inner dynamic. A team that is encouraged to have the kinds of conversations from time to time where people can say what it's like to be here, how I find it being here, what my experience here really is, what we're up to. So that a mindful team is not only focused on its goals and outcomes, although of course these are really, really important, but it also gives some attention to what it's like to be here, how we're doing together, how are we as a team. So that kind of capacity to reflect on the team and on its inner dynamics increases. A really key element in team mindfulness, we believe. And for us, that's one of the ways in which you can begin to bring about organizational changes, by encouraging teams to spend time reflecting on what it's like here, what it's like to be this particular team right now, and to create contexts where it's safe to do that.
Could I feed in one of these questions?
Yeah.
It's one you already noticed. How can mindful leadership help change organizational and particularly school culture to one that's more compassionate and kind? So Maggie has asked that question.
Yeah. Well, clearly, Maggie, I mean, the more people practicing mindfulness in the school, the more chance you have. But really, it's the same point as trying to encourage people to have certain conversations. I think that really is a big part of the key here, trying to encourage people not only to be focusing on the nitty-gritty day-to-day that obviously they need to focus on and obviously they need to pay attention to, but to try to draw people's attention to a wider dynamic. How are we being together? What are we up to together? What's it like for each of us being here? And can we speak out together to each other and begin to discuss what it's like here, how we're finding this, how we're finding this work, how we're finding being here. And not in a way that leads to a kind of moan fest, but in a way which is hopefully helpful. Maggie, would you like to say more?
Sorry, apologies. I was on mute. No, Michael, thank you. That's really helpful. And I love your notion of team mindfulness. What's it like to be here? How are we together? And I do think that different type of conversation does begin to help to model the sort of culture that we want to see. I think my curiosity now probably links into one of the other questions, which is schools, like many organisations, are very driven, striving places. And for many leaders, busyness is all worn like a badge of honor, almost.
Of course.
And creating the permission, and that it's not only is it okay to have these conversations and how they are as important as any other conversations you have, it's actually imperative that you do.
Yes.
For me, it's getting to that realization that these are really important conversations to have, which might link a bit with the question around cynicism, possibly.
Yeah.
But thank you for your response. I really appreciate it.
Sure. I mean, what this whole space of conversation puts me in mind of is Ian McGilchrist's notion of the master and his emissary. I don't know if people are at all familiar with his work. It's a rather complex neuroscientific analysis of the brain and its part in shaping culture. But you know, one of the things that McGilchrist has a fable about the master and his emissary, and it goes like this. The fable is that, you know, one time there was a spiritual master who governed a large realm, a large domain, in which his people were happy and were thriving. And they loved him for his attitudes and his kindness, generosity. But as the realm got bigger and bigger and bigger, so he found that he wasn't able to govern it all himself. So he created a number of emissaries who went out to govern on his behalf. And these emissaries went out to different parts of the realm and were doing the master's work out there. And eventually one of them was doing really, really well. He was administering really brilliantly. And he came to think that, hang on, I'm actually in charge here, and I'm doing this really, really well. And gradually he began to assume the master's regalia for himself. And he thought, actually, I'm better at this. And he started to have contempt for the master. And so he returned to the home domain and imprisoned the master and took over. And eventually the whole realm fell into disrepair and poverty. And the story is that the master is those parts of our mind, you could say, that are connected, that see interconnectedness, that are based in feeling, based in values, based in the things that most deeply matter to us, based in the things that give our life meaning. Those, you might say, are the master qualities. And the emissary qualities are going out there and administering, ticking boxes, making things work, getting stuff done, beginning to manipulate concepts, beginning to think things through rationally. Yeah? And in our culture at large, McGilchrist says, that the emissaries have taken over and imprisoned the master. We've got things badly upside down and back to front. The things that give our lives meaning, the things that actually vivify us, make life worth living, make it important to be here on this planet. These things have all been suppressed and held down by the world of doing, the world of ticking boxes, the world of getting stuff done, the world of achieving, the world of striving. And we need to redress the balance. So you could say that a big part of the mindfulness project is individually, we turn our attention to those parts of our own mind where we recognize and resonate with interconnectedness, where we resonate with life all around us, where we feel the things that give our lives meaning, and we live from that place. And the whole temptation of the culture all around us, and the imperative in the culture all around us, is to pull us off kilter and into the stuff that probably in the end doesn't matter that much. That stuff
Michael.
of getting stuff done. That, yeah, fish for pond.
Good. Brilliant. It's such rich material, and we've got a lot of comments in the chat. and
Yes.
people have really responded. So I've been doing some sorting out of these questions, these points. And one way we could proceed now would be that I give you a few points. There are some points around specifics and some points that are raising bigger, more general questions. So what I could do now is to give you a few specifics, and you could talk about them for a bit, and then we pick on some of the bigger questions and see where we go with that.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, another way we could just stop and you could read the chat and see what you want to do. But okay, good. So Susie asks, what useful anchors are there to help embed and sustain a mindful approach to leadership in the context of complexity, challenge, and no time? So absolutely what you've just been talking about. Chris asks about the importance of bringing mindful communication into the workplace. And Trisha asks, how do you persuade leaders to buy into mindfulness coaching and training to bring about a more meaningful change in working culture rather than offering tick box ad hoc mindfulness sessions? Okay, so I'm sure those are all things that you're very familiar with. Anchors, meaningful culture change, communication.
Okay. Look, I mean, part of the issue that we're facing generally is the challenge for mindfulness more widely, that it's come to be sort of associated with well-being, that it's come to be associated with the world of, I don't know, aromatherapy and, you know, mindfulness bath salts and all of that sort of stuff. And it's come to be thought of as really just a kind of a well-being intervention, which it also is. It also is. But much more importantly, it's a way of helping people to understand their own minds and work from a different set of values, to work from a more profound and deeper set of values, and to become more compassionate rather than just, you know, slightly happier. So there are big differences here, and I think it's really important that we continue to reassert the genuine value of mindfulness rather than allow it to be put down with, you know, the sort of yoga session that's run once a month for staff into that category. I think it's important that if you're teaching mindfulness in the workplace, that you don't allow yourself to be brought in on that basis, as it were, rather that you speak of it instead as something that can impact organizational culture and needs to be thought of in that kind of category. So if you yourself are a mindfulness teacher and are offering it in organizations, it's important that I would suggest that you can come into it from a culture change perspective more than from a health and well-being perspective. I'd like to suggest that for a start. So that depends on the way in which you yourself speak to the organization. I want to just say a little bit about mindful communication, actually, because that's such an important point. You know, something I often say in leadership context is, you know, the three most important things that a leader needs to do are listen, listen, and listen. And we're really lousy at listening in our culture in general. And part of the problem is that we're so time poor, and speech is rather slow. Speech proceeds at around about 125 words a minute, and thought goes a heck of a lot faster. And the result of this is that when someone's talking to us, delivering their words at 125 words a minute, we often think that we've got time to do other stuff. I get it. You know, I know what they're saying. I get it. So I can go off and think and plan about this other thing that I'm going to do after I've had this meeting with this person and get all of that sorted out, then I'll have time to nip back and listen a bit more to what they're saying, so I can kind of put it together. But hey, it's coming slowly. It's only coming at 125 words a minute. So I'm getting it. So I'll just nip off and do a little bit more thinking here about this and that, a little bit more planning there, and then I'll nip back and listen a bit more and listen a bit more. And then I'll nip off again and do a little bit more thinking about something that's more interesting. And then I'll nip back and I'll listen. And in the process, now we're stopping our listening. And the result is that we're not getting what the other person is trying to say. So we're starting now perhaps to think that the other person isn't very good and very clear in what they're trying to say, because what they're trying to say isn't coming across very clearly, because we've only caught about a quarter of it, and we're trying to infer the rest of it from the tiny bit that we've caught. And then we nip off again, and then we get a bit irritated with them for not being clear. And so it happens. So we don't listen. And that has started to be, I think, and I notice, a deep cultural habit, not listening to people. So there's something to be said for actually raising that as an issue, that we're not great at listening, and that we can all listen more carefully and listen better. And you can teach, mindful listening exercises of various sorts, and I'm sure you can find them on the web if you look. I incorporate several into my own training, where you can really show people how much they tend to miss by not listening. So that's a vital element in mindful leadership in general, and in fact for all of us in life in general.
Okay, Michael, I'd like to invite Richard Edwards. Are you there, Richard?
I am. Yes.
Yeah, you've put a really interesting question. I think might just take this another step further. I happen to know about your organization, but perhaps you could just say it rather than me reading it out. What a button. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. I run a homelessness organization that works with people who with very complex lives, often who've experienced complex and compound trauma. We run an open access service as well as accommodation services. So we're working with people who are going through a lot of difficulties, and that presents an environment that can be quite challenging to staff, and therefore it can be quite a difficult environment. So I'm interested in looking at how mindful leadership can, using the analogy of the yacht rather than the dinghy on a rough sea, of how we can keep an even keel as we develop the organization and move forward without being thrown all over the place by the inevitable chaos that we're dealing with because of the nature of the work that we're facing, but also how that can bleed in and move into the staff team and the service users that we're working with at the same time. So that's what I'm looking at, and how that links into change management as well. So it's quite complex, but it's a real testing ground, I think, for how mindfulness can make a difference. I'd just like your insight into that, really.
Well, I have very limited insight into that, Richard, because it's not a world that I've personally worked very much in. But I guess I'd be interested in knowing what your sense is of how much people who work in the organization would be up for any kind of formal mindfulness training.
Yeah, we have a staff team of around 57, and I run mindfulness sessions, or have run mindfulness sessions, and asked staff if they'd like to take part, and I think there were 24 members of staff who said they'd love to. So I think there is a real appetite for that. So it was coming on to 40% of the staff team that wanted to do that. But again, finding the time within 12-hour shifts is difficult, and it's created some resentment within the staff team that some of the staff are going upstairs and sitting down doing nothing for 15 minutes while they're running around doing the work that they could be doing while they're downstairs. So it's getting that understanding, I suppose. And I was interested in what you were saying earlier about using it as a culture change rather than a well-being thing. because I think the staff that wanted to be involved in mindfulness saw it as their own personal well-being, to help them manage their own personal stress in dealing with the job. But I think maybe shifting that a little bit towards the idea of it being managing the organisation and managing culture change within the organisation might be a better way to look at introducing the concept of mindfulness within the organisation at a different level to just running sessions, as you were saying.
Yes, and I mean, another way of speaking about it is not so much as something that people are going to have for their own well-being, so much as training to help people manage the clients differently.
Mm.
And it may be that if it's offered in along the lines of other offerings that may be there to help the people learn how to work with the clients, then that might change the way in which it's conceived by everyone. So look, this is a skill that some of you may want to explore to help you work with our client group differently and more effectively, rather than as something for yourself. Because of course it is always for people's individual benefit. We can say that maybe goes without saying. We don't need to offer it in those terms. But it is actually very, very valuable for helping people to remain grounded, to keep their stability, to stay safe and to stay centered in the face of all the chaos that they're facing. So from that point of view, it's a kind of skill for doing the work more than a personal well-being thing. So that might help. It might also help if there were other offerings which other people could sign up to help them do the work differently. I don't know what these might be. If it fitted within a suite of those, that might be helpful. It may also be that if you find that there's a core of people who are interested in taking things further from the taste of things that they've had, that you create a kind of in your own time offering. You know, so for people who want to do this, take this further, want to do that in their own time, here are some options and some possibilities that you can have. So maybe both of those might help. But then I'd say, you know, within if within the leadership group there were people who wanted to take it further, that would be very helpful, because they can begin to hold the space and model a different way of being.
Thank you.
Okay, there's a couple of, that was really interesting, by the way. And there's a couple of questions here. Rob is asking, it would be good to hear a little bit more about mindfulness and values in leadership. And Mike asks, is this the same as working with the shadow side of organizations? I wonder if looking at those questions could be the next step in this discussion. I just wonder, Mike, would you like to say anything about what you mean by the shadow side of organizations? I know you work with a lot of teams.
Yeah, I think in the change process, it's often the focus is above the water. It's what you see, so it's visible behaviors. But the shadow side is that either it's the culture, it's how we do things here, but it's also going into things like attachment and projection and transference. So it's very much working with the unknowns, if you like, and paying attention. So listening to you earlier, I realized how mindfulness could get us into that space to actually, because we're told change doesn't work because we're working with the wrong things. We're working with process, not with what's really important to people, I think.
Yes. So you're sort of raising the kind of Beyond-esque, I guess, questions, and about what happens in group dynamics, and how these various features show up when people come together to work together. And I think one of the really valuable things that mindfulness can offer here is the capacity to begin to shine a spotlight on some of the unspokens and some of the invisibles, and to allow people to have those kinds of conversations. So it would be about really encouraging, finding ways to encourage those unspoken things to be voiced in a safe context. And where mindfulness can really help there is by creating that kind of psychological safety, that attitude of allowing. I think that really is key here, is that over and again we explicitly reinforce an attitude which is kindly and allowing. And that requires a kind of leadership modeling where you can, as a leader or as a consultant or as someone intervening in the situation, you hear and don't react, and stay present and stay open, and show that over and again. That willingness to hold, to not be thrown by, to pay attention to, and to come back with kindness and understanding to whatever it is that is actually moving in the situation. So I think that's one of the real keys, is the mindfulness of the leader there, and the mindfulness of the coach or the consultant or whoever's doing the intervention that is needed to bring about the change. That this is done with an attitude of real care, kindness, openness, presence, non-reactivity.
I wonder if Rob's question comes next then. Rob, would you like to say any more about what you have in mind in asking about values? I know that in your organization there is a lot of concern and training for values in leadership.
Yeah, it was. I think there was a couple of things for me. I guess I think you mentioned values earlier on a couple of times, and so I guess there was a bit in Richard's question about valuing mindfulness. So I guess there were people who valued mindfulness, and then there were people who quite liked the idea of the space or the being able to go upstairs and not be involved in all the chaos that was happening. So there was a valuing for them, I guess, in what the others were getting. And I guess then there was also a bit for me about whether in leadership, whether linking, I suppose, to our personal values individually and then perhaps collectively allow us to kind of move in a coming back to change, to move in a value direction, I guess. Something along those lines I was thinking, really.
Yeah. I guess we could come back to the thing I was talking about earlier with the master and his emissary. And it's for the person practicing mindfulness and for the person trying to institute or to assist in the process of change. The real key is to stay connected, to stay in touch with oneself, to stay connected with others, to stay connected with the sense of the flow of life, to cultivate one's own attitudes of openness, empathy, and compassion, and to proceed from that basis. And that, I think, is a form of modeling and of holding that enables others to see other ways of doing things. Organizations today, as I look at them, just seem slightly insane. They seem to be driving people crazy. I mean that fairly literally. We've created collectively a culture which is focused on delivery, on achievement, on KPIs, on box ticking, in a way that is inhumane, and which increasingly just treats people as objects. And the real essence of mindfulness, I think, is to recognize our common humanity and to stay in touch not only with our common humanity, but with the whole interconnected web of life all around us. That's our task as mindful leaders and as people who are trying to encourage mindful leadership, to maintain that sense of connectedness and of valuing. And when we start ourselves falling into the world of achieving, doing, busyness, KPIs and ticking
What's
boxes.
a KPI?
Key performance indicators.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry. Things can go awry very quickly. So a big chunk of this is encouraging the people who can model a different way of being in the organization, developing that in oneself and beginning to encourage others to go about it differently.
I'd like to feed in a question now from Sarah, who says, how can you change schools culture in a school when you're a teacher of mindfulness, but not an official school leader? Would you like to say any more about that, Sarah?
Hi,
No?
everyone.
Oh,
sorry,
right.
yeah, I'm here.
Lovely.
Sorry. Yeah, I've been teaching mindfulness in school for a number of years, and I won't tell you the story of that, but I was just thinking, I can offer these, a daily practice slot. I can teach young people mindfulness and, offer the 8-week course to colleagues once a year. But it seems there comes a point where the systems, just stay the same. And so I was just I'm not a school leader. I'm a secondary school teacher. So I just was interested if you had any ideas on that. Perhaps not. Perhaps there isn't any way I can.
It's a good question.
In the busyness and the striving that is school life.
Yeah. I think it's these are such important questions, and I think part of what I'd say is be gentle on yourself. You're not obliged to do that to change organizational culture. I mean, who the heck said that teaching anyone an 8-week course was going to change organizational culture? But it does equip people with some useful skills. It really does. It makes a difference. So I think we all need to remember where it is that we're working. When we do the work we do, all of us need to have a kind of due modesty about what we can and cannot do. All of us. There's a limit to what we can do. So we should do what we can within the context that we can do it in, I would say all the time. And at the same time, maintain a continuous intentionality to gently push this water uphill all the time, and that is really what it can feel like sometimes. So there's a limit to what we individually can achieve, and at the same time we can make a difference to people's lives. And we know, all of us who've taught mindfulness to others know that sometimes the difference we make to people's lives is astonishing and beyond value. So holding on to that and continuing to look for opportunities to have conversations, to influence, to make a difference, but recognize that there are real limitations at the same time, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, Sarah. Right, I'd like to go to the other end of the spectrum now. Katie, you're trying to change the world, I understand. I know Katie as well. Would you like to, so you've asked a question in the chat about how we use mindfulness to rebuild connections lost in our food system. Would you like to say any more about that, Katie?
Yeah, I will. I mean, it basically comes down to what Michael just said earlier about being an interconnected web. And I think a food system is a brilliant example of an interconnected web. You know, and the difficult tensions there are, the different aspects that need to be thinking about with everything from climate change and biodiversity and food poverty and, you know, fair work and obesity. And, you know, there's just realms and realms of things in the food system. And one of the problems that we have, or I guess there's a lot of discourse around some of the challenges that we need to invest in as people around things like climate change and, you know, caring for the people that are producing our food and that kind of thing, and the costs of those things. So, you know, it potentially costs more in monetary terms to produce, you know, food more locally, for example, but actually the environmental costs that we see through, you know, highly processed foods that, you know, rely on forced labor from overseas and deforestation and that kind of thing. There's so much in there, and it's about the system's leadership and really in how mindfulness can assist in thinking through that system's leadership piece. So I guess it's how mindfulness can support complex system thinking in a way in which it brings people along on the journey and supports culture change at the same time, because I think the challenges that we have in our food system are not going to be changed by policies alone. They need to be changed by hearts and minds as well. Sorry, I've just rambled quite a lot there because it's 8 o'clock in the evening.
Do you know what is really fabulous about what I've just heard from you, Katie, which is an absolutely brilliant summary of some of the stuff that, you know, we've been hearing more and more about. The fact that we've been hearing more and more about it. This is just wonderful. You know, this stuff has been going on for a very, very, very long time. We've had a dysfunctional food system in our culture for decades. And we're hearing more and more and more about these dysfunctionalities. We're hearing more and more about the problems. More and more people are getting engaged with trying to come up with solutions to some of these issues. And that is wonderful. So the fact that what you've just said is not unknown, probably, to everybody on this call is a tribute already to the activists who are working in this space. And it's the activists who are working in this space who are bringing about this change of consciousness, slowly, pushing the water uphill, maintaining an intentionality, keeping at it, keeping their shoulders to the wheel, you know, is beginning to affect the possibilities of change. And this is how change happens. People keep at it, and people link up, and people have conversations and make connections with others and find opportunities to talk, and so on and so on and so on. And clearly it's happening because, you know, what you've just said sounds familiar, which is wonderful, wonderful. So I'd say that, you know, activism is so vital, and the kind of activism that you're describing there, and obviously evidencing in your own behavior is vital. And what mindfulness may offer here is the capacity for activists to stay centered, the capacity for activists to engage in their activism without losing heart and without behaving inappropriately, without just getting cross and frustrated and furious, and to stay centered, to stay intentional, to stay focused. So I'd say the attitude with which the activism is implemented is crucial. An attitude that enables others to come along with it, an attitude which is friendly, kind, compassionate, and at the same time focused and intentional. So training activists, I would say, is a wonderful offering in this space, and to enable activists to have access to some of the resources that we know are so valuable in the world of mindfulness is a great way of helping these many different causes to move themselves forward by helping people to stay focused and resourced.
Michael, just weaving some of these threads together, what I heard from Katie was a very holistic, interconnected, systems-based view of, in this case, society through the prism of food, really. And I know that a number of the people here who I already know are trying to bring about a culture change in their organizations, a culture change that in a way reflects a similar outlook and perspective. I'm wondering if it's possible to talk about that, what that outlook and perspective might be, in a way that relates to mindfulness, and also how mindfulness practice supports that more holistic, interconnected outlook, which I think is the sort of thing you were talking about at the beginning with Ian McGilchrist and the Master and the Emissary.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. That's so important. If we go back to, yes, indeed, McGilchrist's work, the suggestion that the Master that I was talking about represents a kind of holistic, intuitive way of knowing. The Emissary represents a conceptual, target-driven, striving, achieving way of knowing and being. So really, many of the conversations we've had between us so far seem to me to call for, how do we implement this more intuitive, holistic, kind, caring, interconnected way of being in the context that we find ourselves in. And what I'm suggesting from here is that mindfulness practice connects us with that. Mindfulness practice is a means by which we can touch ourselves on what really matters to us. We can begin to live a bit more from our own sense of the interconnected web of life. We can open ourselves more to the world that is moving through us and through others and with others. We can feel our connectedness. Feeling our connectedness is really crucial. And in the world of activism and in the world of seeking to implement change, it's so easy to be pulled off center and to lose that connection with our own values, with what really matters in our own lives, with what really brought us here in the first place, which is a wish to see things unfold differently in the world around us. So mindfulness practice is a means to help us individually connect with that sense of base, you could say, the place where our values live, the place that really matters to us, that our own heart center, if you like, and to feel from there into the world of others, and to recognize when we go too far away from that into the world of striving, of seeking to change and seeking to do and seeking to achieve, so that we get stretched a bit thin and we start to lose our ability to connect with others, to connect with the world around us. So for ourselves, it's a vital practice to keep that sense of connection. And it's also something that we can offer others, this capacity, an increase in their capacity to stay connected with what really matters, and an increase in their capacity to stay connected with one another in a way that is genuine, which is deep, which is heartfelt, and not part of the superficial kind of nonsense and froth that churns all around us all the time. So really, it's a methodology for bringing mindfulness in this respect can be a methodology for enabling us to do things differently. Vishwapani, I saw you.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground already, haven't we? I've been selecting from the many questions in the chat. I'd just like to, and that means there are some questions that we haven't got to. I'd like to invite anyone whose question I haven't picked up, who'd really like to ask it. If you could repost it in the chat, then we can come to it. Otherwise, we'll move into a meditation and so on. Anyone feel that their question, they'd really like to ask it? This is a masterclass, I think, we've been having today. Kerry, yes, just ask your question, please.
Hi, thanks very much, Noswain Blan. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. I can talk at length about Transcendental Meditation, and I'm quite evangelical about it, but I'm not going to do that now. What I would just say is that when I started doing it 10 years ago, it's amazing the transformation it's had in me, because it makes you that much more calmer and practical. And just in terms of the world of work, it helps you see reality better. You see things with a much greater clarity about what you're doing, and it helps you deal with stress that much better. Now, I work in Pembrokeshire County Council in the planning department, and we've had a massive problem with stress over the last 2 years. I work in a team of 6. There are 2 teams of 6, that's 12 people. Out of those 12 people, 5 of them have gone, or 6 of them have gone on long-term sick leave. And we're not talking weeks here, we're talking about months. And I tell them, and I say, look, I do meditation, but they just won't buy into it. And there's a cynicism out there. I mean, when I started doing my meditation course, my mum thought I was going to join the Moonies and I'd be dancing in airports in orange robes and all that. But there's a cynicism out there, and it's, and you were saying, Michael, it's, you know, it's there with the wellness bath oils and stuff like that. How do you get mainstream people in an office environment to buy into this? That's my question, really.
Well, in Buddhist circles, there's a term called skillful means. Skillful means. Skillful means is using something which is, you know, useful right now to bring about the end that you desire. Skillful means, from where I'm sitting when it comes to mindfulness, certainly, is science. Mindfulness isn't about scientific research. It's not about psychological research. You know, for 2,500 years of its history, there was no psychological research or clinical research behind its efficacy. But these days, there's a vast body of evidence that tells us about certain changes that come about, particularly when you practice. The most researched intervention is mindfulness meditation. So mindfulness meditation comes these days with a huge body of scientific evidence behind it that is, you know, widely available. So I think learning about some of that and taking a stand on some of that, speaking from that place, can really help people to see that, you know, this isn't flaky, it's not voodoo, it's not woo-woo, it's not odd. It's stuff that has been clinically researched, that's been published in respectable journals, that's actually scientifically based. Demonstrable changes have shown up from people who engage in it. So I think that's the thing that I find personally most helpful when I'm talking to people in organizational settings, is to begin with a discussion of the science and take it from there.
Okay, great. And Daryl would also like to ask a question. Daryl.
Hi. Yeah, I think it continues a little from what you were just saying. I agree that when I have conversations in organizations that science similarly helps, but I suppose if you would comment a wee bit then on the tightrope, because I think it's quite brave of an organization to invite someone in to work with mindfulness, and I think a climate of trust not only for any participants to be created psychologically, but also between any teacher of mindfulness and the group that's there. So speaking the language that they speak, providing the evidence base, yeah, I think is really, really important. But it's then, I think, shifting to that balance of actually we need some time to then begin to introduce the practices. And I guess I'm interested in that shift, and the approaches that you have found have really supported that.
Well, I think that the science really helps. So you can talk about, this is what shows up in the research, and this is the time that it took to get those sorts of changes, for example. And if you find that these kinds of changes are desirable, then it does take time. It's not something that's going to be achieved in, very, very short interventions. If you're really interested in the kinds of changes that, we're talking about, Chet, then you need to invest in them. And that does take time. So what I tend to do is to find out what really is the organization looking for, what really matters to them. What do they care about, and what are they willing to invest in? And then, you use that as a way of forming a conversation. But it takes a bit of time to get to know the organization, to research, what they're up to, what's currently pressing for them, what are their big challenges right now? How might what you have to offer help them? And to speak in their language, in their terms, and to be respectful of those terms, and to take it from there. Look, what we're trying to do is to reach out to people where they are, connect with them where they are, and then help them, to move in a direction that is, more beneficial to them and to others. But you're not trying to drag people kicking and screaming against their will. It's a gentle and interactive process. So it's, what do you need? How can I help? Where would you like to go? How might we do this? And this is honestly what I can offer. This is truthfully what I can offer to help you meet the goals that you actually have. And this is what might come from that. And then, of course, other good things might come from it as well. But that's another conversation.
Michael, it's 12:27. How about, so we're meant to finish at past.
Okay.
What about a short meditation?
Oh, yeah.
To close.
Cool. Very good. Okay, folks, let's do a very short meditation. So we began by, considering the situation in Ukraine right now. And perhaps we can move on to bringing a kind of sense of warm well-wishing, initially to ourselves and to other people on this call, and then to people around the world. And recognizing that in doing this, we're not changing anyone, but really what we're connecting with is our own intention to be as kind and effective and helpful to others as we can be. And feeling that. So if it's helpful to you, you could close your eyes and just begin by connecting with your own body and your own breath. Feeling your body and feeling your breath. And feeling a sense of well-wishing towards yourself right now. We all want to be happy. None of us wants to suffer. And not only do we want this for ourselves, it's universal. It's what everyone wants. So we all want to be happy, and we can just acknowledge that to ourselves. And if it helps, even in the most basic way, you could think about the things you do for yourself, just washing yourself, brushing your teeth, dressing in clothes that are comfortable, keeping your environment warm if you're able to, feeding yourself well. The things we do for ourselves, the ways in which we try to take care of ourselves, the ways we seek to be happy. And then we can begin to extend from that, recognizing that this is what everyone wants. And this is good. We all want to be happy. So may we be well. May we be happy and free from suffering. May we all be happy and free from suffering. And just allowing that intention to resonate us in whatever way it does. May we be happy and free from suffering. All of us, everywhere. Okay, thank you very much. We're now at 8:30.
Yeah. Well, look, let me just thank you, Michael, for sharing so much of yourself, so much of your experience, your wisdom, your willingness to listen and to engage. I feel despite having known you for an embarrassingly long period of time, I've learned a lot today. And it's great to see how you engage with all of these topics and the questions. Thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us. I know not everyone is in Wales, and that's all right. But particularly as we are Mindfulness Wales, we really do want to build a community of people who are engaging in mindfulness and want to help and want to change society in Wales. We'll finish there.